We're thrilled to have you with us for this conversation. I'm Lauren McCardle. I'm the Executive Director of the Berman Museum here at Ursinus College. And I'm really excited to welcome you to this installation, which is part of a multi-site retrospective of Syd's work that spans her 50-year career in partnership with Woodmere Museum in Mount Airy and the Maguire Museum at St. Joe's. There are 3 separate but related exhibitions. If you haven't seen the others yet, they are open, and we encourage and invite you to please take advantage of the opportunity to see so much of Syd's work. The narrative woven by these 3 exhibitions is one of Syd's dedication to research and craft, as well as the innovation that comes from such sustained practice. So we are truly just thrilled to be part of this collaborative project with our partner museums. I want to thank Syd for her vision and for agreeing to let us show her newest work here at the Berman. Thanks also to Steve Donegan, who became a critical member of our install team, and to whom we're immensely grateful. Both of you brought such humor and calmness and creativity to this project. We're eternally grateful to you. Many thanks also to our colleagues at Woodmere Art Museum. Director Bill Valerio is here, Curator Amy Gillette, and many other members of your team, Hilly Toe. Others were super helpful and collaborative as well, Amy Faraci and Marie Latham in communication, so thank you. And to our collaborators at the Maguire, Director Emily Haig is in the room, and Curator Jean Bracey, and their team have been wonderful to work with back at the back. Get some chairs, Emily. Also to our lenders for the exhibition, the Petrucci Family Foundation of African American Art, and Sarah Willie Lebreton and Jonathan Lebreton. I want to give a shout out as well. I've been talking them up a lot tonight, but Jim Ennis and his team at the Challenge Program, which is an incredible organization whose mission is to provide vocational training in the construction and woodworking trades for Delaware youth. They constructed home places, the shed and the gallery upstairs, and they're fabulous. Thank you, Syd, for connecting us with them. Thanks lastly to our wonderful and hardworking Berman Museum team and staff, our student workers who work tirelessly and are so committed to realizing the visions of the artists that we work with. I'm eternally grateful to you. A couple last minute things. The exhibition at the Maguire Museum at St. Joe's University will be opening to the public, a public opening reception on February 19th, so save that date for another chance to celebrate Syd. We will have the Clay Studios Claymobile here at the Berman for a family day on March 28th. And there are numerous other programs offered at Woodmere Art Museum over the coming weeks, so please keep your eye out for those. And lastly, I want to mention the incredible, beautiful catalog that was produced for these exhibitions, of which there is a copy upstairs in the gallery and one at the front desk, and which is available for sale at Woodmere Art Museum. So, now that I've gotten that out of the way, let me please introduce our speakers. I don't know if Syd needs an introduction in this context, but I want to just mention her virtuosic career in ceramic sculpture for over 50 years, exploring the intersections of African American histories and heritage, land, placemaking, and farming. She continues to push the boundaries of her materials, as we'll hear more about in the conversation this evening. Jennifer Zwilling, an Ursinus alumna, is the curator and director of artistic programs at the Clay Studio in Philadelphia. We are thrilled to welcome Jen back to UC to engage in this dialogue with Syd. I know you two know each other very well, so I'm very much looking forward to hearing your conversation. So before I begin, I just want to point out that several of you may have found note cards and writing utensils on your seats. And that is to invite you to scribble down thoughts or notes as you listen to Jen and Syd talk. We really would like this to be an open dialogue and conversation. So as you hear the conversation tonight, you can pop your hand up for a question as they speak, or you can save your questions for a Q&A at the end. If you don't want to ask a question out loud, you can pass your note cards up and they'll be read up here. So please do participate. I know our speakers really invite you to engage with them tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jen and Syd. And I will hand it off to you, Jen.
Before we get on with the actual program, I have to say some thank yous because this is all.
It's on.
Okay, you're there. I just wanted to say thank you to all three museums for giving me such a unique opportunity to be able to share my work from over 50 years in these three esteemed venues is unheard of for me, obviously, and just something that is has brought me to a place of being humble, of course, by all of this, because I look back and I see all of the work that I've done, and to have an opportunity to show it in this sequence of events is just, for me, a revelation, because it reintroduces me to a self from so many years ago, to be able to be reunited with these pieces. And that wouldn't have happened without the generosity, the coordination, just the major efforts that were put out by these three museums. So just thank you to all of you, Emily, Lauren, Bill Valerio, Jean, all of these people who have worked so hard to make this what has become one of the pinnacles of my life. I get to say that, okay? I'm amazed by that. So thank you so much. So on with the discussion.
I think that really proves again something we were talking about earlier, which is that Syd often puts the spotlight on other people, which is part of her amazing humanity and why that comes out through your artwork. So a lovely way to start. I also want to thank everyone for choosing me to have the privilege of having this conversation with you. It really means a lot to be here with one of my heroes of ceramic in the place where I went to school, where I first started, um, understanding that I wanted to work in museums and with artists. So it's very special to me. Thank you. And I do want to get back to that idea of what it feels like for you to be in these spaces. But first, let's go back a little further. And I'm going to ask the question that I always ask artists, which is, when and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art? And there can be two parts. Sometimes it's, when did you know you were an artist? And that doesn't always line up to, when did you know this was going to be your career? So could you talk a little bit about those two ideas?
Sure. The idea of when did I know I was an artist, that for me is one of those questions that points to the fact that I was always one. As a child, I think we are born as artists, especially if you're thinking about how you perceive the world. And it's not something that you're trained to do. We talk about, where did you receive your training? Yes, there's training involved in being, the technical aspects of working in your medium, all of those issues around being a professional that eventually you become. But knowing that you want to go in that direction, for me, was something that was always supported, encouraged. My mother, Ernestine Carpenter, who becomes a primary source of content and memory and just grounding myself. She was an artist, but she didn't get a chance to practice it. She didn't get a chance to pursue it because in the 50s, what did women do? What did African American women do? They raised their kids, and that required sacrifice. So she'd never discouraged me. I tell the story that I was accepted to Penn as a pre-med student. And when we had to make the choice of where I was going to go, was I going to go to art school or was I going to go to Penn and become a doctor. And at the time, certainly African-American women doctors were in great need, but I was never discouraged. It was, oh, obviously, we're going to Tyler. And that's, I had that kind of encouragement, that kind of assumption about who I was, that provided all kinds of affirmation. I wouldn't say that I was the most confident, but I knew that that's what I was going to be because I already was. I thought about the world in ways that now I understood to be the ways that an artist would think about and demonstrate their perceptions of the world. So that question leads me to just say I've always been an artist. As a child, it was my it was my source. It's where I sprung from, all the things that allowed me to have the life that I do now.
And you remember having experiences and processing the world through making and creativity.
Yeah, I was always a maker. Materials, I lived in an area where I could wander in the woods, and I could I went to art school when I was little. We would go to the museums in Pittsburgh, and they had art classes, and I went. It was just, that was my calling. And so it's always been something that leads me through everything. I always say that the best part of my life has been being an artist. And those of you in the audience who are artists, I don't think you would change a thing. I don't think you would decide to be something else if you're still doing it now.
I love that you have such clear answers to both sides of that because you were born an artist. You've always felt that way, but you did make a decision. You had a very strong moment where you had to choose. And that's brave. I also think what just came up for me when you said that was if you were going to be pre-med, you must have been really interested in science.
I think at the time it was offered to young people who had this motivation to be curious about everything. So I was demonstrating that in loving to read, doing well on tests, all of those kinds of things that demonstrated that I was going to be more than average in my academic pursuits. And so that's
They put you in a track.
yeah, I was on a track that I didn't know I was on a track, but I was being observed.
Yeah.
And when recommendations for these opportunities were coming along, I was given one, given an opportunity to do that.
That's so interesting.
And the idea of, I think I was smart enough to ask the question, what would I be doing all day? And that was something that, how would I be spending my days? And I realized, having gone to doctors' offices and seen doctors and nurses, I decided I don't think I want to do that. Yeah.
Although it does kind of follow the theme that we talked about earlier, which is caring and nurturing, but that's for a little later in the conversation. So the next thing for me is you as a young artist, you went to art school, we could talk about that experience, but when you mentioned the other day and just now being in these spaces and thinking about yourself 50 years ago, can you talk a little bit about that person 50 years ago and how she might have felt walking into these spaces? How the idea of 50 years on, having 3 retrospectives, having all these people wanting to hear you talk, what do you think she would have thought about that?
Obviously not in any way imagining that could happen, but I do remember, maybe in my 30s, I remember wondering what my mature work would look like. I wanted to know where all this was leading. What was I making that was going to propel me into a space that allowed me to be noticed by the work? So I do remember that. And just the person that was asking that question, I mean, if I go back into my teens, I certainly couldn't even conceptualize what the art world was. I had no idea of what this life entailed, what that meant. But a little later on, I was able to observe, I was becoming aware of the professionalism, of the what was necessary to sustain myself. So there was some level of just becoming aware, smart, getting smarter about it. And if you're going to do this, you do need to have some sense of how it works. Was I going to be accepted into that world and be a part of that? That was certainly nothing that I dared assign to myself. In other words, I didn't have a plan. And that was who I was. I just made. One of the things I always say, and I said this to my students, is 70%, maybe 85% of life is showing up. And that's what I modeled myself on, that awareness, that knowledge that if I didn't go to the studio, if I didn't go and look at exhibitions at the PMA or in New York or what, I wouldn't know what was there, what other people were doing. So I knew that that was important, is that I had to show up. And that was an important motivator, because with every phase of that showing up, I think I got a little bit smarter, a little bit more, no, I'm going to say a lot more intentional about making work, about getting noticed. I just knew that I could apply for things, I could get grants, and those things started to come along. And so it's just this process of understanding what game you're in, if you see it that way. For me, it's a life. See, there's the process, and then there is the reality. The reality comes from me not ever giving myself the option of doing anything else. There was never, well, I'm not making enough money, so I better, you know, get another profession. That was never, ever going to be an option. And then, of course, there's the practicalities of it. How do I move through and sustain myself? One of the important places that helped me move along was the Sandy Webster Gallery. And one of the amazing people who worked with me, Vera Grobes, is here. And she knew me when. And she was one of the folks who helped me. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, see, these folks are from way back. Yeah, yeah. So amazing. Yeah, so the Sandy Webster Gallery, Vera, and a number of other people were there at the onset. So that was really key. And teaching you and giving you opportunity. And for artists, opportunity is the ignition point. You move from one to the other, and you're aware of these, they collaborate with you in a way, not in the studio, but on the journey that you're on. And you're lucky if you are able to land and associate yourself and find folks who have faith in what you're doing and help you. And so that's key to my progress, is being aware of who is beside me.
Swimming in the stream with you.
Hmm?
Swimming in the stream.
Yeah, you're not the only fish in the pond.
So now being here as you are now, looking back, and you've been noting different moments, you mentioned when you were 30 and you thought, what is my work going to look like in the future? What was happening at that moment that awoke you to have that question?
Well, it's the hunger. You're making stuff and you wonder, is this as good as it's going to get, or what is going to be that work that propels me? And I should say that I never had an issue with not knowing what to make. I didn't have downtime where I had to figure out what the work was going to be. I just kept making things and wondering and also getting affirmation from getting into shows. All of those things help you to, well, they encourage you. Encouragement for artists is really critical. It's not the only thing that makes you move forward with your work. You do have to find the motivation and not always from outside. There has to be, you know, a slow burn, if anything, that keeps you moving forward in the work. So I've never lost that. Even if I was making work that wasn't that good, I kept making it until I made something good. You just keep making. And so you can't be discouraged by, well, nobody paid attention to me today. Well, what did you do? How are you promoting the energy, the drive, the inclination? Because besides, it's not always exciting. I was telling someone before that for me, my studio is a dangerous place. And the reason why it's dangerous is because I don't know what's going to happen in there. I often don't know the process because everything I do is a new event and I have to invent it. So I rarely has there been this prescriptive way of now I know what to do next. Now never know what to do next. I have to be in there even when it's not going well. I have to show up and then something will happen. Hopefully something will happen. But that's what keeps me going is the possibility. But I never feel safe in that I know this is going to work out.
That
I don't. I don't know if this is going to work out.
So, yeah, that deserves a round. Go ahead. That brings me to the different streams of the kinds of work that you've done. So I don't know if it was around that 30 that you started teaching in Swarthmore, maybe. But so teaching is a stream and gardening is so important. And then obviously making your work is the central pillar. But as you were just talking about making your work and not knowing exactly what's going to happen and just showing up every day, those are the same things that you have to do for gardening and for teaching. When you go into the classroom, not every day is the best inspiration for all your students, and you might be tired, but you have to go anyway. And if you ignore the garden and don't lead and nurture it, it's not going to be its best either. So all of these things have a parallel, and you seem to approach them all kind of in the same way. So I know that people have often asked you about your gardening and how it's related to your work, but you mentioned your mother. So for those maybe who don't know, can you talk a little bit more about how your mother as your inspiration, one of your inspirations as your artist, has also affected that aspect of your life?
My mother was an artist, and her artistry showed up in her garden, in the way she dressed, how she decorated her home. So for me, there was that in place. So she was very important in that. And also, I feel as if I'm living her dream. So not that I feel responsible to her, but I feel that if she had the opportunities that I had, she would have been brilliant because she just had this sensitivity to what she experienced, and she could have told quite a tale, and she would have done it as an artist. I don't know what material. I know she taught me, or at least she showed me how to draw. I went to drawing classes at Carnegie Mellon when I was a kid, and but basically she was the one buying me the sketchbooks and the pencils
Driving you to the museum.
and driving me to the museums to take the classes. So she was immensely influential, if I can use that kind of sterile word. She was more than influential, but I feel like her spirit moves through me, and I claim that. I acknowledge how important she is. And obviously, through the last 10 years, I've been making these mother pin sculptures that are her. I'm embodying her in that work. It's always going to be her. And so I feel kind of happy about how things are developing, that I get these opportunities because I feel like I'm able to share them with her spirit. And it just, that that there's a warmth there, and it's not about professionalism and accomplishment or achievement. It's about this sense of sharing these experiences and these opportunities with her. Did I answer your question?
You did. I asked a very multi-part question. So the next
Okay.
part, that was a beautiful answer. Thank you. I'll just also say that when I ask people that question about their origins, so many people talk about their mothers, and it
Mhm.
gets me. The next part is about how your garden
Oh, okay.
inspires you.
I bought a house, and that was a big move for me because it was land. And I realize in this country, in this culture, land basically gives you information that without land, without ownership, you're at the whims of those who do have land and who do own. So for me, as an African American woman, to be able to own a property, my mother owned her property, but it was critical for me. And once I had that land, I'm looking around in this beautiful neighborhood that I live in, and there are gardens all over the place. And my mom had a garden down the street from us because we had a little village. My mom lived a block away from the house that I bought. My sister, she owned a house a block away, and my brother lived very close to where. So it was, the Carpenter clan, we had land. And that was important to me. And then to garden it, because my mom was gardening, was just obvious. And it was something that I realized I could not be without. I had to get engaged with what plants did as an artist, as a sculptor. So it has become my second studio. That garden on that corner is my second studio. That's where ideas are developed. I can respond to and collaborate with these amazing beings, and I think they are beings. And so to be able to engage them as an artist, it's a dream, and it teaches me what's going to happen in the studio as well. I'm always thinking about sculpture in terms of the way plants move and how plants resolve their own issues, because they do. And I just have to watch them. And so it is, the garden itself is foundational, connects me to my mother. It's just an essential part of who I am as a person.
Amazing. So lovely. I'm gonna, we're gonna remember that when we talk about teaching in a few minutes, but was that realization when you had your own land, is that part of what inspired you to go do your research on African American farms in the South? That knowledge, that continuous ownership of the land was so integral.
Oh, absolutely. Um, she's referring to a road trip I took to South Carolina, um, to the Gullah Islands in Georgia. And I was looking for African American farms that had been in the family for many generations. I call them legacy farms. And that's because they were still there despite so many African Americans migrating, the Great Migration, north and west. And so here you had a lot of people who didn't go. They stayed on the land despite the indignities and the efforts to get them off their land. So I saw them as the most courageous people. And because they're staying on the land, sustained communities that gave our folks a location. And once again, that feeling of affirmation, ownership, stewardship, all of those things that are valued and are currency. And so you had these places that I think of as sacred. And to be a little crude, these were real badass people if they stayed on that land despite what was going on around them. And so taking that trip and finding these folks, there's an organization called the Southern African American Farmers Organic Network. And so all of these farms that I visited were organic. And, but there were all obviously others that were not, but, that gave a kind of potency to it. And so I got to meet these really amazing people and make portraits of their farms. And so a lot of the work that you're seeing, the pieces that are in the barn, those are portraits of farms that I visited. And there are several at the Woodmere Museum as well. And so those are their homage to these people who I see as heroes and heroines because they stayed on their land and are able to pass it along. And so that whole idea is very, very critical to me of being on the land. So when I see urban farmers and I talk to them and what they're doing, one of my first question is, do you own this? Because if they don't, they can be displaced easily. So that's critical. Even once you've left the farm or the place down south and you move up, what's your goal here? And I know that initially it was to distance yourself from the indignities of being a farmer. Especially one from the South, a Black farmer. Up in the North, you wanted to immediately become part of the modern world. Modernity was a goal. You wanted to participate in what was happening in the future, not what was happening in the past. But now that I find that when I meet farmers, there's a pride and an ownership. And for me, it signifies status. And what are we in this country other than folks consumed by the seeking status? And Black people are not immune to that. But now it's status that is originating in a past, an amazing past.
And being a farmer it's honorable and a calling, like being an artist.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I mean, there are just so many opportunities for me as an artist to observe it, because when I first started doing the research around it, I couldn't find many artists who were using it as content. So I saw myself as beginning to fill a gap and hoping that other artists would pick up that theme and celebrate the earth and us on it as a people, as stewards, not victims.
And I think you have started that. There
I
are
hope
many
so.
young artists that we could probably, many of us, talk about that are thinking about Earth and all of these important topics. So definitely, you definitely did that. Um, so the farm portraits, and there are two up on the screen right now, were an exploration of you representing these places and the people on them through the objects that you chose, and your interest in expanding to metal to make these the vision that you wanted them to be, was one step maybe. And there was a beautiful show at the Mitchner Museum of many of these. And then upstairs we see another step with the barn form that you've really taken the home and you've put it in the gallery. You've really put the place there. And for the first time in the gallery, we get to see the images of your trip, which was very powerful. Do you want to talk a little bit about the expansion to different materials? And I'd love to talk about the title of your exhibition upstairs and how important it was to put the materials right into the title.
I'm an artist. I'm not specifically identifying myself as a clay artist. I'm an artist, and I think about how I can express an idea. How can I get it to exist? And I I started out as a painter, developed work in clay extensively, and now I'm still moving. It's just a question of transitioning and moving forward and figuring out ways to get a vision out there. So adapting different materials, gotta go there. You have to figure out how it's going to get done. What are you going to use to get it done? Who's going to help you to get it done? And so my ideas are the motivators. And can I, and so my challenge is, you know, when are you going to have another good idea? What's the new idea? Because then we'll figure out how to make it and get it done. So aluminum, wood, steel, acrylic paint. I was using a lot of lentil beans for a while. So whatever it takes to get the idea out. I don't, so I'm doing sculpture right now, but I have a feeling that there's some printmaking in my future because I need to, some of the pieces up there, the ginkgo mother pins have prints in them, and I need more. I need some more prints. So I've got to make some prints so that and I'll probably have, and I've got clay in the next series as well. So it just has to do with visualizing something and wanting it to appear, and what does it take to get it to appear.
And is the specific title Homebound Clay, Wood, and Steel? Did I say it right? Can you talk about what homebound means to you?
Homebound, that's a circular thing because it means you left your home. And so for me, to give this show that title is not only thinking about having left in some way, but there's also the return, this kind of spiraling back into your origins. And so homebound in clay, steel, and wood, it's my journey. I have to use all these materials to make that journey back, to return. And so it's almost a spiral, that an upward moving spiral. You're returning, but each time you pass, you go further with it. So it's not a circle that takes me back to the original. It's a circle that advances me towards ideas that can be realized. and I'm doing it in different materials. And also, I just like the sense of the word home. Home places is an important idea for me. A lot of the sculptures are homes. They're home places. They're those places that people did not leave during the migration. So the home word is very important and has substance. And I hope that when you read it and think about it, you think of all the different layers that home can represent.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about gardening and making, and I want to talk a little bit about your teaching and the ways that you approached how to support your students. Because I've heard you say really wonderful things about your approach to giving them what they needed and helping them along their journeys.
So teaching, I have to say, am an opportunist when it comes to teaching because you never know who's in that room with you, do you? They're sitting there and they're looking at you. And I realize that there's there's an opportunity in here to receive as much as I give and figuring out how to give it without obstructing who they are, to provide affirmation that they're here and what they think, feel, and perceive is as important as anybody else's. Because usually they will come into the studios feeling insecure. But my feeling is, you came, didn't you? You showed up. So there's something that we can work with here. So my feeling about teaching is to ask the right questions and have them provide the answers. I never show my work to them. They can Google me if they want to, but I'm not going to show them my work to in any way indicate this is something that I expect you to follow or imitate. No, that would be very, very disappointing if I turned out some little Syds. It doesn't work. So I'm always asking good questions, or at least I think they're pretty good. And one of the things that I always say to them, because you come into an art class and your idea is to make something beautiful. That's what art is, isn't it? It's beauty. Um, and my sense of that is, okay, we'll go for that. I try to avoid blue glazes in the studio. But I know they want blue glazes, and I'm not going to, offend them by saying your taste is minimal. You need to do some other things. You need to be more daring. Um, but what I say is, don't try to be me. If anything, I am more interested in glorious failures than safe success. Yeah, you can make the gift for your mother and for your friends, but I also want to see where you took risks. Show me that thing that blew up. Show me that thing that collapsed. Show me that thing that you think is ugly. Because the other thing I would always say to them is, don't be afraid of ugly, because we'll talk about it, because they have preconceived notions of what pretty is and what ugly is and what's unacceptable, all of those things. So in those initial classes that I'm teaching, foundation drawing or sculpture, whatever, I'm interested in what you risked because that's going to move it forward. I don't want you to make things that you think look like art. I tell them that you need to notice what you notice because that's going to be your art. And you have to keep track of that and not be ashamed of it. And you need to claim it. What are you noticing? You're calling yourself weird. Oh, congratulations. So we're trying to progress. We're trying to find new knowledge and new experience for you. And so that's my whole motivation for teaching. And knowing that a lot of them are smarter than me. So they're going to make something surprising if you give them the opportunity. It's one of those things. Do not try to make art here. Just what do you respond to? What do we want to try? Let's see if it blows up.
So over the last couple of weeks, we've had some conversations, and Sid and I are working on a project for the future. And in all of these conversations, there's always a moment when Sid asks to turn the focus onto others. So in a conversation about a show for the future, it was about who's the emerging talent that we can lift up. I want to give them an opportunity. I want to reach down and pull them up the way other people did that for you. When we were talking about this talk, she said, I don't want us to just talk. I want to hear what the students have to say. I want to make sure that we give them the opportunity to talk. I feel like that, along with the way you've talked about gardening, that they are beings, you are helping them, you're giving them the opportunity to grow. And the same with your artwork. There is this theme of cultivating everything around you that is it's been a real privilege to be able to have several conversations with you lately, to have this wonderful realization that you embody cultivating everything that's around you. I'm not sure there's a question in here. But I do want to use this opportunity to turn to the audience and ask. I of course do have one more question for later if we don't have enough chat back, and I don't want to not give you a chance to respond to the cultivating idea. But does anyone have a question that they would like to ask? Favor, yeah.
So I think, thank you both. I raised my hand because my question kind of like, it's going to continue from where you stopped about like this idea of nurturing the younger generation of artists and students. And it makes me think about how even in nature, it's kind of similar to womanhood, like being a mother, thinking about this idea of getting pregnant as a seed, giving birth as fruit, bearing leaves, as like producing and like procreating. I think about that and I'm like wondering if there is and you've mentioned like your mom is very, was very influential in your practice, but I think about are there other shoulders you were able to stand on as an artist that you were creating at the time where I suppose the same way it wasn't popular to have women in medicine, it wasn't also really that popular to have women artists, but you were doing something different. So are there like other shoulders, maybe women now in this case, that were also like that you were able to stand on and were also influential, maybe in your environment or like where you grew up, outside the home? I'm just like very curious about that. And because I see how
Were there specific people that?
yes, like what are the other shoulders you were able to like, stand on as you were taking this bold step to be an artist at a time where it wasn't also really popular or well appreciated. As
Well, actually, names of people, I have to think about being in school and watching the other women, primarily Black women who were um, compelled as much as I was. And then being out in the world and watching what was happening in contemporary art and who was doing what at the time. So there were so many. I mean, the idea of exposing myself to these groups of women who were doing things, people who, like Emma Amos, who was one woman who was in a group of men. I mean, there are just numbers of these women that, I could begin to list. It would be enormous. But I think it's about being aware that they're there, because that's the idea of, can I be there? I'm here. Can I be there where they are? And so it's being aware of the presence of these women. And also the show that's at the Maguire has some of I, women that came up or went out, got out of the gate the same time I did. Martha Jackson Jarvis, Sana Musasama. These are, and they're in my show. You, they're in my show, and so I'm so excited by that, and propelled by that. I mean, once you see that you have a place, that there are others who are going through the same thing that you're going through, and it provides momentum. So, standing on shoulders, but at the same time, sharing in the momentum and being aware that there are all of these other women doing it and not seeing them as a threat. you know, just like, let's move each other along.
Lovely. Thank you. Great question. Anybody else? You want to do it?
I have a question on behalf of a student who isn't able to be here. She asks, what inspired you to focus on the histories of African American farmers, and how do you hope your work influences viewers' understanding of these stories?
Well, I was gardening. My mother was gardening. My grandmother had a farm, not a farm, but she had a victory garden. So when I had land, I wanted to see who else was practicing this, who was doing this with the same kind of passion that I was doing it. So that inspired me. In other words, I had to go looking for folks. And that's really what motivated me and continues. I'm always looking for new farms. And, at some point, if I'm on the planet long enough, I want to go visit some more farms in the South and elsewhere, because there weren't too many. Well, in fact, I never found an actual working farm in the North, even though I went to the state fairs. Like, who's going to be at the state fair? Nobody. So it was just this whole idea of trying to find people like me doing what I was doing. Now, I do not grow food. My garden is ornamental garden, and occasionally something edible shows up. But that didn't stop me from being in need of who was connected on this level that was about sustainability, community, affirmation, all of these things. And I saw the farmers as representing that. Did I answer her question? Okay.
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Bill? Yeah.
So you can give me this. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder, Sid, if you would talk a little bit about the ginkgo leaf guardian figures, which are such a revelation tonight. I mean, I think we're all seeing them for the first time, right? Of anybody?
Yeah, they've never been out. They were made in the last 6 months.
Well, I just want to say, I know you've described them as guardian figures. What are they guarding? I mean, we live in a world today where well, I'd love to hear more about them.
In this installation, they are guarding the ascending mother pin, the blue 6 foot tall mother pin. But yeah, they're guarding her in that installation. And if you look at them closely, they are being guarded as well by ghost mother pins. There are 4 ghost mother pins in each one of those panels. So the idea around guardianship, protecting, that is critical at this time. You know, I may be stretching it, but when I look into it and I think about guardian, I think about what's happening now to our country and the necessity for us to hold on to each other, that we have to be each other's guardians. So the word goes beyond my content of a mother pin and extends to just the experience of knowing now that guardianship is important, that we have to think about that word more deeply and not just symbolically, but in actuality. So these guardian figures are, and I don't give them the title. It's Ginkgo Mother Pin 1, 2, 3, 4. But, you know, in looking at the installation and how it was necessary for it to be installed in that manner, I understand and need to represent guardianship. And I may have to rename those 4 pieces. The issue of anonymous guardianship doesn't work for me. It has to be hands-on, because that's where we are right now. Did I answer your question? Okay.
To me, these are they have a bit of like they've been excavated from a house in a way. There's the patterns of how people arrange their homes, and these the swooping marks to me look like the plaster work of, you know, the hand of the worker who's building the house. So does it have something to do with that, or is it just me? Are you are you thinking about a home still when you're thinking about these pieces?
I'm not thinking of them in terms of that functional, and that surface is not about function. That surface is about trying to represent the movement, the vitality of a leaf. I'm a gardener. I watch leaves move all the time. And it's that, you know, the series that's upstairs in that front room, those are leaves that have been expanded. And in other words, if you took a leaf and were able to blow air into that and give it volume, what I got were these things that look like animals. So this is a representation of leaves moving, fluttering. And most of my sculpture, I'm interested in movement. I'm not really concerned so much with symmetry. It's always about, for me in clay, was defying the weight, defying the necessity for things to be symmetrical and therefore more stable. So I'm always trying to defy the issue around weight and stability and sustainability in an object and in a material that's not supposed to represent instability and movement and changing of the way something, you know, its configuration. So it's about making those leaves look like, well, I didn't know they were going to look like animals, but then they did. And then making these look like fluttering leaves, I knew that was going to happen. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. So that was what I was after. And that's what's there. Yeah, but not plastering houses.
So it looks like anyway. And those leaf forms do like animals, but also you have given them movement. They seem very light because they're up on their toes.
Right, they're moving. That's a herd.
Yeah, it's a herd. And you walk from that space into the next space, and the work is different, but it's still Syd.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, we have one in, oh, couple more people. We have a couple more minutes. I'll go up next to you.
Hey Sid,
Hi.
my name's Tuhin. So I learned about you thanks to this show. And as you've been talking, I think arguably what's maybe even more valuable than your beautiful works of art is the approach you took when you were creating. So what I would love to know is what's the one life philosophy or approach that you can offer to uh, a creator of any kind that would help them stay on the path that they've chosen for themselves?
Find your people. And by that, I mean those who are going through the same experiences. Um, it's not always going to be your family who provide the support. They might be completely in opposition to your choice. So in order for you to sustain yourself, I would say do not work in isolation. Find your people. And those are the people that, you can also serve them, encourage them. And I just think that sense of community in a young artist is really important. It's a practical decision to look for people who are experiencing the same thing, because then you can get information. And so that whole idea of feeling that you somehow disappointed your family, or somehow you are being ridiculed for making this choice that seems so irresponsible, all of those words can really remove any sense of purpose because you have disappointed someone. You have to buck up. If you can't take a hit, this is not your game. Okay? And you can get support from other people who are also taking the hit because they know what it feels like. And you don't have to feel so isolated and feel that in some way you are not living up to your potential. All of that stuff. If you're an artist, take a hit because you're going to get many of them. But at the same time, keep showing up and find your people.
Beautiful. All right, I saw one more hand. Still have one more hand, and I think that might be the last question.
Thank you both so much.
Hey, Angelique.
Hi.
One of my girls.
Yes, I love you so much. And this is just such an incredible retrospective of your work. I'm excited to get over to the other spaces as well. And thank you for sharing so much in this artist talk. It is so insightful to hear directly from the artists. So my question is kind of big, but you can like pick and choose which parts. So one of the things is I was thinking about being upstairs in the gallery, and I love how the scale of your work moves between like the Black spatial imaginary and abstract, but also this historical grounding and like adding to the archive. And so my question is around kind of the future and leaning more into like the Afrofuturism side, but what are your big dreams for land and clay and stewardship and ownership and guardianship? I know. And then the other side of that is, can you just speak to like the energetic, spiritual, or intuitive part of your practice?
Let's see. Let's approach the first question first.
Thank you.
Because every word, every category that you mentioned in your question is a stepping stone to making art. You can make art about that, choosing that. To me, that if you start reading and looking about words like sovereignty, say some of the other words you said. Yeah. Ugh. all of that. I mean, that to me, I like words. I like verbs, and verbs will make me move forward in a work. You know, the idea of how do you make an object or an image appear to have stewardship? Then you start looking for stuff. And I think that, you know, all of that to me is food for getting the game rolling, getting the ball rolling, is selecting something that's critical to you that represents some direction that you feel some ownership to, some of, you know, that you feel an affiliation with, because that's where the honest work is going to come from. So what was your second part?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know what like you're reading or listening to in your studio. You know, like do you have music when you're gardening or like working?
Sometimes I do. I'm reading a book now called Testimony of Trees by Baranda Montgomery. And so the idea of the history of the importance of trees to Black farmers and Black people. And so the testimony of trees. And do I listen to music in the studio? Yeah, I need to, because this may sound silly. I need to dance. I'm in the studio, and when the beat happens, I start dancing around.
I don't know that there's anything better to end on. Thank you, Syd. Thanks everyone for coming and listening. It's been a privilege and an honor. It was so nice to hear all your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks. See you upstairs.